I am going to share some answers to some questions that I got from you. I've been doing a lot of YouTube channels about starting a pizzeria, operating a pizzeria, and I got a ton of requests for questions. People asking me all these questions. And, if you need help, you can email me, bruce@smartpizzamarketing.com, if you need some help if you're already open. If you're open, you just need a little bit of help with marketing, email me. I can probably push you in the right direction. But if you're just getting started or you're not sure if you want to open, there's not much that I can do for you. Watch the YouTube videos, watch the channel, listen to the podcast. But sometimes you got to just work it out and really make sure you want to do it. But I get a lot of questions, so I figured, you know what? Instead of me spending 4 hours on emailing people back, ask your question here on the post on YouTube, and I'll do a podcast answering your question. So that way, if you have that question, I'm sure other people do too. So let's get into them. Here are a couple questions I've been thinking about for a while. First, as a first timer, is it better to buy a business or build it from scratch? I've heard it could take a long time with permits, city hall, fire department, etc. This is a great question, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, because a lot of people want to get started in the pizza business, and they don't know if they should open their own or if they should buy an existing business. And I've changed my thought process on this over the last year or so. The more people I go visit, the more horror stories I hear about starting your own business and buying a business. First off, this is just let me just start by saying, this is my advice. Take it or leave it. This is what I would do. Me. I'm not telling you what to do. You need to go take this advice and analyze it and see if it's right fit for you. But this is what I would do. I wouldn't buy an existing business. I may buy an existing business if it was a good deal and there was equipment in there, but I have no desire to buy somebody else's business and continue what they are doing. The only way I would buy somebody's existing business is if it had the equipment I wanted it, if it was in the location I wanted it to be, and they were selling it based on those factors. I don't care about your customers. I don't care about the pizza you're making. I don't care about your recipes. I am not going to use any of that. All I want is the shell, and that's all I would pay somebody for. So it may be hard for you to find somebody, unless they're in distress, to sell their business without taking any of the sales or customers into the equation. Now, it's a different story if you find a business and the owner is making the exact kind of pizza you want, is in the exact area you want, and is doing exactly what you want to do, and you buy that business. But then the hard part about that is you have to do what they're doing, otherwise you're going to lose customers anyway. So my thought process would be, if I'm going to buy somebody else's business, I'm going to take over the spot, pay for the equipment, whatever that's worth, and that's all I care about. Anything else on top of that, I don't care about, so I don't want to pay for that. And then if I was going to start without buying a business or buying a spot, and I was just getting started, I probably would start with pop-ups and smaller versions of a pizza trailer just to see if I actually like running the business, because it's a way smaller investment than buying a brick and mortar and getting started that way. And I have heard a ton of horror stories about doing your own build out, so I would probably avoid that. Hopefully that's helpful. In general terms, is it fair to say that net profit may be around 15 to 20% of net sales? I mean, there's no saying. Yeah, it should be there if you run a tight business, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be there. You could be a horrible business person, and before you know it, you're doing $1 million in sales and you have no profit. I've heard of that many times. People doing $1 million in sales in their business and there's no profit left over. Then at some point you're doing something wrong in the business, whether it's inventory, payroll, the things you're buying are not, your priced menu is not correct. Yeah, it should be 15 to 20%. Doesn't mean it's going to be. Is it better to have in-house delivery service or apps? I would prefer not to do delivery at all if I could. If I could get away with not doing delivery, I wouldn't do delivery. Is it hard to get an alcohol license in the U.S.? Hard? I don't know. We got it. It's not hard. It's not easy. It costs some money. And there's a whole rigmarole process you have to go through depending on what town you're in. But I wouldn't say it's difficult. And then last but not least, out of the 100% of square footage, what percent should your kitchen and which service? I'm not sure I get that question, but let me just say, so for me, if I was to do a pizzeria and say I had 1,000 square feet, I would make 800 of it the kitchen. And the service area would be small. I wouldn't even have maybe have a couple tables or a couple booths and just 5 or 6 tables that I could put a couple chairs at. So people, if they want to eat in there, they can, but the majority of that space would be kitchen. Next question. How to find info needed for a good business plan? I mean, that's a good question. Business plans are kind of hard to find for pizza shops. You have to go and ask people. I think if I was going to open a pizza shop, and this is kind of what I did with the podcast. The reason you're listening to this YouTube channel or started the podcast was I wanted to talk to people who were doing what I was doing, and I could ask them questions about what they were doing so I could go use that in my business, or at least get a little bit of information for research. If I was going to open a pizza shop, I would pretend I was a reporter. If I'm a reporter, I'm going to go and talk to 5 or 6 people who are doing something similar to what I want to do and ask them questions. Now, you're probably going to get rejected a lot because there's nothing in it for them in order to give you that information. But if you ask 10 or 15 people in the pizza industry about their business, 4 to 6 of them will be transparent enough where you can get enough information to figure out if you want to do that or not, and get the real numbers behind it. And also listen to our YouTube channel, listen to the podcast. I try to more on the podcast lately, ask people numbers if they're open to it, because I want to give that information on. I want to be able to, it's great to hear the story of how somebody ran their business and got started. But what you're actually looking for in the podcast is like the numbers. Like, how much money do you make? How many pizzas do you sell? What are you selling those pizzas for? What's the profit margin? How much is flour? How much is your cheese? How much is your sauce? How much is your gas bill? How much is the electric? What's your payroll? Like, all of those questions you need to know before you open a pizzeria and decide if it's the right thing to do. Not easy to get people to talk about that, though. They don't necessarily love to talk about numbers because, you know what I mean? Next question. Ovens at home don't get as hot. How do you perfect a recipe before making the business if you don't have the ovens you would use in a pizzeria? This is a really good question, and I think there's 2 things you can do. The Ooni or Gosney get a bad rap, but I do think those are good starter ovens. The only bad part about those ovens is they kind of make one style of pizza, a Neapolitan-ish pizza. Like, you can do Detroit's in there. You can do 16s with the bigger Ooni, but it doesn't come out like a New York style pizza. What you can do is there's something that I've been working on in my house, which is the baking steel. Shout out to the baking steel. We'll put a link in the description if you want to check it out after the podcast is over. The baking steel at home gets your oven just as hot as it would a commercial oven. You either need one for a good bottom bake, or what you do is you get 2. You put one on top, one on the bottom, crank that heat up in your home oven to 500 degrees and let it preheat for a good 30 to 40 minutes. And then you could make really good New York style pizza in your home oven. So if you do want to do New York style pizza, that's what I would do. And I love the baking steel. I used to use the baking steel. Well, Andres, I know the owner of Baking Steel. He's been on the podcast a couple times, friend of mine. When he sent me one to use, and I was like, wow, this is great, but this fucking thing is so heavy. There is no way I'm going to be pulling this in and out of the oven every time I want to make a pizza. I'm not going to do that. So I didn't use it for a while. And then I had Dan Richer, who we did a video with here. We'll put it somewhere on here. You can go check out. And I was doing the podcast with him, and we were talking about like making New York style pizza at home. And he said, we started to talk about the baking steel. And I told him that. I said, I don't like the baking steel because I don't want to pull it. It's so heavy. My wife can't pull it out of the oven, and I don't want to pull it out every time I got to make a pizza. And he's like, dude, just leave it in there. And ever since he told me that, I've left the baking steel in my oven, and I just cook everything else right on it. And it's the best thing ever. And every time I want to make a New York style pizza, I just crank that thing up to 500 degrees, let it preheat for 30, 45 minutes, and boom, you have it. New York style pizza right at home. I love it. All right, next question. Opening a completely new location versus buying and maybe rebranding a current location. I think I kind of answered that before. I would probably buy an existing location if the equipment was the right equipment for me and all the plumbing and everything was right, but I don't care about the sales or the customers or the pizza, so I wouldn't want to pay them for that. I'd probably start looking for a distressed location. Anything operational, POS systems, business accounting, cash versus card, that's a whole lot of podcasts. I'll have to come back to that one. I do think Slice, shout out to Slice, in all transparency, I am working with Slice now. They do have a lot coming for pizza operators. They have a point of sale system now. They have online ordering. They have a phone service, which is they answer the phones for you, which is crazy. I wish I had that back in the day when I was operating, because I would have jumped on that in a second. And the thing that they have is it's not automated, and it's not random people answering your phone. What they do is they have a team, and that specific team works answering your phones all the time. So they get to know your customers, they get to know your menu, they get to know what you have, and customers get used to talking to the same people just like they do in your restaurant. I remember operating the pizzeria, and there would be customers that would just get delivery, and we would know them by talking to them on the phone, but we would never see them. They would never know what we looked like. They didn't even know where we were. All they knew was our phone number and that we delivered to their house. So Slice is working on something like that. It may even be out by the time this podcast gets released, but go check that out. I'll link it up in the descriptions. Game changer if you don't want to get rid of your phones, but you don't want to answer your phones. It's unbelievable. Fireway Pizza is the fastest growing franchise in the UK. Do you know why? No, but I'll have to check them out. I did not know that. What would you recommend before opening a restaurant? Pop-ups, making pizza for friends and family? I would start making pizza, friends and family, get your recipe right, and then I would do pop-ups, and then maybe even go work for somebody if I could, just to kind of see if that's exactly what I would want to do. Because it's not easy. It's not easy to do your own thing, and it's not easy to open a pizzeria. Trust me, I've done that many, many, many times, and it can be challenging at times. I thought there was a question in here about a small town, too. Let me just see if... Oh, here we go. What about opening a pizzeria in a rural town versus in a city? Currently only have Hungry Howie's here. Closest pizzeria in any direction is 22 to 25 miles away. Population is plus minus 5,000. I would not touch that with a 10-foot pole. I would not open a pizzeria in a town with less than 20,000 people. And that's just me. Again, that's just me. I did the whole small town thing extremely hard because you may be the only place in town, but you are struggling for every single person in that town who gets pizza. You're competing for that customer. If you have 20 or 25,000 people, which I consider kind of small, then there's a lot of people who get pizza, and you're fighting for a percentage of the people who get pizza. But when you're in a town of 5,000 people or less, you're fighting for every single person who orders pizza. You're fighting for that customer. And if you lose a couple of them, then it's going to be extremely hard for you to build that business up. And like, I don't know if it's 22 to 25 miles away is because like that's how rural it is, but that's an extremely long distance for anybody to come visit you. So you're never going to scale that business beyond a certain point. So for me, I would avoid that one. I would not go near that one whatsoever. Last question here. I hope you're enjoying this. I know I'm going a little bit fast on these podcasts, but I want to answer all these questions. You often talk about social media. What platforms would you get started on if you were just starting out today? Well, I love this question. If I was starting out today on social media, running my business, I would probably start with TikTok or Instagram, maybe both, because you can kind of do similar content on that, and YouTube. Now, this is social media. I know YouTube is technically not social media, but I would do short form video because I could put that on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts. But then I would do longer form videos on YouTube that could live on forever. There are a couple places doing that now that do a really good job. Peddling Pizza. One of them has a pizza shop. I don't know if he has a pizza shop, but he has a pizza cart in the UK. And he kind of does like day in the life videos. And then there's another one, Pizza Shop Stop Preston, I think I've seen on YouTube, where they do more of like longer live streams. I don't know if I would necessarily do it that way. What I would do is I would hire somebody who would be a media person / inside person. So a lot of these kids want to be YouTubers. And I say, great, you want to be a YouTuber? Come in, help me. You know the platforms, you know what works on there because you watched all of that content. It's 50% of your time you work for me. You do this, which is the media. You help me record, edit, post, come up with thumbnails, come up with titles, do the YouTube shorts, and then post those on Instagram, TikTok. The other 50% of the time, you're going to work in the kitchen so I can show you the business and I can show you how to make pizza because one of those pays for the other. So you can't just come in and make a salary being a full-time media person at the beginning. But if we do what we're supposed to do right, you eventually can get monetized on YouTube, and then maybe you can go 50-50 with that person on the ad spend or the ad money you get, the revenue from your YouTube channel. Which if you do it consistently over time, in the first year, you should be able to get enough watch time and enough subscribers to be able to get monetized so you can start making money on those YouTube channels. And that's what I would do. And that's what I suggest people do all the time. Does anybody do it? No. Nobody takes me up on it. Nobody listens to me. But that's what I would do. Short form video for Reels, TikTok, and YouTube, because you can cross-post those. And then longer form videos that go on forever on YouTube. And the reason I would do that is because if you post to TikTok, its potential to go viral is pretty high. I mean, not pretty high, but there is potential for you to go viral. On Reels, it's a little bit smaller. On Facebook, it's non-existent. On X, it's non-existent. And on LinkedIn, it's non-existent. But if you post longer form videos on YouTube, somebody could search YouTube or Google a year from now and find that information. And YouTube will serve them that video if it's something that they're searching for, even if it's a year old. Go to YouTube right now and type in something about plumbing. I'm sure you're going to find videos that have been created a year or two ago, and you're watching them now because you search for that term. That's what YouTube allows you to do. No social media platform, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, allows content to live on that long. And that's why I would start YouTube. Is anybody going to do it? Probably not. But that's what I would do. All right. That's enough of me rambling on the podcast. If you have a question, throw it in the chat below. Whether you're listening to the podcast on audio or you're watching on YouTube, throw it in the chat below. Happy to answer all of your questions. Hang out with you guys. If you want to email me, Bruce@SmartPizzaMarketing is the way to go. Everything I mentioned in this video / podcast, I will put in the description. Check out Slice. Highly recommend you check out their phone ordering if you have a pizza shop that you want to have phones, but you don't want to answer them yourself. And then a couple other things I mentioned here, I will put in the description below this video. Thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate you. See you right back here next week, everybody.